No
You are
human
safe
had
now.
ever stood
I am
inside
here.
the Hall of
Thank you.
Tides.
I feel your
Elias
presence.
Varen knew that the moment the floor beneath his boots shifted, not physically, but socially, the air itself seemed to weigh him, thick with ionized perfume and old authority. The vaulted chamber curved upward like the inside of a pearl, its walls alive with slow-moving constellations that mirrored the oceans of the planet Lasara. Bioluminescent sigils glided across the ceiling, recording history as it happened. And now history was watching him. At the center of the hall stood Queen Mareth IX, sovereign of Lasara and matriarch of the pelagic throne. She was taller than any human, her elongated form draped in flowing mantle fins that shimmered between silver and deep blue. Her eyes, black as abyssal trenches, rested calmly on the assembly before her. On the dais beside her floated a translucent cradle field. Inside it slept her child, the heir to an empire spanning 12 star systems. And Elias Varen was the only human in the room. He hadn't planned to be here. 6 months ago, he'd been repairing atmospheric skimmers on the outer platforms, a contract worker with no political clearance and no desire for it. Lasara was beautiful, yes, but dangerous. A world of living seas and semi-aquatic beings who had mastered bioengineering centuries before humans learned faster than light travel. He was supposed to leave when his contract ended. Instead, he stayed. Because someone had tried to assassinate the Queen's child. And because Elias had been in the wrong place at the right time. The attempt happened on a quiet cycle during the luminous drift, when Lasara's moons aligned and the upper seas glowed bright enough to turn night into a dreamlike dusk. Elias had been assigned to the nursery perimeter, a temporary post due to a staffing shortage. It was a low-risk zone, mostly automated, guarded by Lasaran sentinels grown for vigilance rather than aggression. Until the alarm screamed. The sound wasn't like any siren Elias knew. It vibrated through bone and water alike, triggering a primal response. He ran before thinking, boots skidding across coral-polished flooring as security fields flickered erratically. That was when he saw them. The infiltrators were not Lasaran. They were Vel, mercenaries adapted for vacuum and bloodshed, their chitinous armor absorbing light, their movement sharp and purposeful. 3 of them breached the inner nursery chamber in seconds, disabling the cradle field with a pulsing null wave. The sentinels reacted too slowly. Elias didn't. He didn't have a weapon, just a plasma cutter slung at his hip and the reflexes of someone who'd survived border colonies and pirate raids. He slammed the cutter into overdrive, using it less like a tool and more like a blinding sun. One Vel fell screaming as superheated air ruptured its armor seals. The second turned its rifle on Elias. The third reached for the child. Elias threw himself forward. He remembers fragments after that. The crack of energy discharge tearing through his side, the weightlessness as he tackled the Vel into a support column, the sound of alien bone shattering. He remembers wrapping his body around the cradle, curling instinctively, shielding something small and impossibly fragile. He remembers thinking, this is going to hurt. Then nothing. He woke up in water. Warm. Buoyant. Healing. Medical attendants hovered nearby, their tendrils adjusting nutrient flows, their eyes glowing with diagnostic light. Pain flared briefly, then faded into a dull echo. You should not be alive, one of them said softly, not unkindly. Elias tried to laugh. It came out hoarse. Yeah, he muttered. I get that a lot. They told him later that the Queen herself had authorized the use of regenerative reserves, resources usually saved for royal kin or catastrophic events. His injuries had been severe. Collapsed lung, fractured spine, organ damage from directed energy. No human should have survived. But he did. And now he stood in the Hall of Tides, whole again in body, unsure about everything else. Queen Mareth regarded him in silence. Around them, nobles and commanders murmured, their bioluminescent markings pulsing in restrained agitation. Humans were allies, yes, but fragile ones. Useful, but fleeting. The queen raised one slender hand. The hall fell silent. "Elias Varen," she said, her voice resonant like distant waves. "Step forward." He did. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong. Humans did not approach the pelagic throne unless summoned for judgment or treaty. But he walked anyway, stopping at the base of the dais. Her gaze shifted briefly to the cradle field. "To shield my child with your own body," she continued, "was not an act of logic. You are aware that my species does not require such gestures to secure survival." Elias swallowed. "No, Your Majesty," he said carefully, "but humans do." A ripple passed through the court. Not laughter, not anger, but something uncertain. "Why?" the queen asked. "You had no oath, no bond, no certainty of reward." Elias thought of 100 answers. Because it was right. Because someone had to. Because it was a kid. He chose the simplest. Because, he said, someone was going to get hurt. And it didn't have to be your child. Silence stretched. Then the queen descended from the dais. Gasps echoed as she moved past her guards, her mantle fins brushing the floor like a living tide. She stopped in front of Elias, towering over him, ancient eyes searching his face. "You are aware," she said softly, "that your actions altered the balance of this empire." "I didn't mean to," Elias replied. "I know." She turned slightly, gesturing to the cradle. The field shimmered, lowering just enough to reveal the child within, a small Laceran infant, its translucent skin glowing faintly, its heartbeat visible as pulses of light. "Look," the queen said. Elias hesitated, then stepped closer. The child stirred. Tiny eyes opened and fixed on him. A soft sound escaped the infant, something like a coo, like water flowing over stone. A thin tendril extended from the cradle, brushing Elias's finger. The contact sent a brief, electric warmth through him. The queen inhaled sharply. "Impossible," someone whispered behind them. The child glowed brighter. "That child," the queen said, her voice tight, "has never responded so strongly to any being beyond my own blood." Elias pulled his hand back instinctively. I'm sorry. I didn't mean." "You did nothing wrong," she interrupted. Then something changed. The queen, ruler of oceans and stars, whose word commanded fleets, lowered herself. Slowly, deliberately, she knelt. The sound of her mantle fins touching the floor echoed like thunder. The court erupted in shocked luminescence. Elias froze. "Your Majesty," he blurted, panic edging his voice. "Please don't, this isn't." Queen Mareth bowed her head. "Among my people," she said, loud enough for all to hear, "there exists an ancient law, older than this throne, older than our empire." She lifted her gaze, meeting Elias's eyes. "When one who is not of our kind gives their life to protect the future of Lasara, we do not stand above them." Her voice softened. "We kneel." Elias felt his knees weaken. "I didn't give my life," he said quietly. "I lived." The queen's eyes glimmered. "You are willing to lose it." She rose, the moment passing but its weight lingering. "From this day forward," she declared, "Elias Varen is named Tidebound Protector of the Air. He will be granted sanctuary, honor, and voice within this court." Murmurs turned into debate, then reluctant acceptance. Elias could barely process it. "I'm just a mechanic," he said. The queen smiled, a subtle curve of bioluminescence. "Then you understand how to keep fragile things alive." Months passed. Elias remained on Lasara, no longer a contractor but something stranger, a human fixture in an alien court. He learned the rhythms of the palace, the politics of the nobles, the way the child, named Salith, would calm at the sound of his voice. Threats came and went. The Vel were dealt with. Treaties shifted. Through it all, Elias stayed close. Not as a soldier, not as a hero, but as someone who had once chosen to stand between danger and something innocent. On the anniversary of the attempt, the Queen summoned him again, this time privately, by the upper seas where the palace opened to endless water and light. Salith floated between them, older now, stronger. "Do you regret it?" the Queen asked. That moment, Elias watched the child spin slowly in the water, laughing.
"No," he said.
"Not for a second." The Queen nodded. "Neither do I." She extended a hand, not in command, not in ceremony, but in acknowledgement. Elias took it, and in that quiet moment, beneath alien stars and living seas, a truth settled between them. Empires were not protected by power alone. Sometimes, they were saved by a single human who chose to fall, so a future could stand. The last threat against Lasara came without warning. There were no alarms this time. No dramatic breach of shields or screaming sirens. The attack arrived quietly, disguised as diplomacy. An envoy ship granted passage under ancient accord. Elias was present when the truth unraveled, standing beside Queen Mareth as the delegation revealed itself not as Vel mercenaries, but something far older. The architects. The ones who had seeded Lasara's oceans millennia ago. They did not want the child dead.
They wanted the child changed.
Salith's hybrid resonance, her inexplicable connection to Elias, had awakened something dormant in her genetics. A potential the architects believed belonged to them. They demanded custody, citing creation rights older than any throne. Queen Mareth refused. War would have followed. Instead, Elias stepped forward. He listened as the architects spoke in layered harmonics that bent the air. He watched Salith drift closer to him, instinctively hiding behind his leg, her glow pulsing erratically. And in that moment, Elias understood something no one else did. They weren't afraid of Lasara's fleets. They were afraid of him. Not because he was powerful, but because he represented something they could not predict.
Choice.
"You made her," Elias said calmly, meeting the shifting light that served as the architect's form. "But you didn't raise her. You didn't protect her. You didn't bleed for her." The harmonic sharpened.
"She is not yours," they replied.
Elias knelt.
Slowly, deliberately.
Just as the Queen once had. "She's hers," he said, placing a hand over his heart. "And she gets to decide who she becomes." Salith reached out. Her small tendril wrapped around Elias's wrist. The sea trembled. The resonance surged, not destructive, not violent, but resolute. For the first time, Salith's light stabilized into a steady, brilliant pulse that echoed through the palace and far beyond it, into the oceans, into orbit, into subspace itself. The architects recoiled. They withdrew without another word. Not defeated, but denied. The aftermath reshaped Lasara forever. New laws were written, ones that recognized not just bloodlines but bonds. Elias was offered power, titles, even genetic integration to extend his life alongside Salith's. He refused most of it. Instead, he asked for something simpler. "To stay," he said. "As long as she needs me." Queen Mareth granted it without hesitation. Years passed. Salith grew, not just into an heir, but into a bridge between species. She learned human stories and Lasaran songs. She learned how empires rose and why they fell. When she was afraid, she sought Elias. When she was angry, She challenged her mother. When she was curious, she watched the stars. And Elias aged. Slower than on Earth, but still human. On the day his hair turned fully gray, Salith, now nearly grown, stood beside him at the edge of the upper seas. "You won't always be here," she said quietly. "No," Elias admitted, "but I'll always have been." She nodded, absorbing that in her own way. When Elias finally fell, peacefully, surrounded by water and light, the queen held his hand until the end. She did not weep as humans did. But the oceans of Lasara dimmed for an entire cycle in mourning. At the funeral, something unprecedented occurred. Queen Mareth knelt again. So did Salith. So did the court. And far beyond the palace, across 12 star systems, fleets powered down and lights dimmed, not by command, but by choice. Because everyone knew the truth by then. The Empire had not been saved by prophecy, or power, or design. It had been saved by a human who chose to stand between danger and a child, and who taught a queen, an heir, and an entire civilization what protection truly meant. Long after Elias Varen's name faded from official records, one law remained etched into Lasara's living stone. When one gives themselves for the future, they become part of it forever. And somewhere in the endless oceans of the stars, that truth endured.